Alright, this is today's game, The Legend of Robin Hood. Not the only game of today. This is, well, first of all, it's a hard game for me to get to, part because of the rules, in part because of the board. I've got books on it to try to hold it down. It's one of these terrible, Avalon Hill made these one-piece fold-out, harder boards, and they just don't really work. And in this case, well, a couple of pieces have broken off. Second one just today. I was down here. And it pooches, you try to back fold it and it rips. Struggle of Nations had the same situation. Civilization does too, but somehow its board held together a little better than some of these for whatever reason. Maybe because it didn't matter as much. Alright. This game originally, kind of surprisingly, put out by Operations Studies Group, OSG. Didn't realize that until I looked at the rules credits. And the reason that I did get convinced to play it is, well, it's got a lot of votes over on my voting list, and it's also somebody threw a decent-sized bribe in on it. I'm like, you know, it's not that hard a game, it's not that big a game, let's just get it done. But yeah, reading through the rules, they're a much more of a pain than they should be for a game of this size. In part, again, because of physical design. Who the hell designed the layout on this thing? Age development is Bruce Shelley, but they don't specify who did the artistic design on this. It's not here either. And unfortunately, the board, horrible choice. You know, the layout of all the charts and everything all works fine. It's the physical component. And then one of these damn things. And you'd think by 79 they had given up on them, but it's a one-sheet rule book. And it's designed in a way where, yeah, you can open it up, read, and then you get to the back page, and you have to unfold the whole thing and get back to the beginning. And it just makes it a little bit harder. It makes it a terrible reference. It makes me want to cut the thing up and try to mount it on other paper or something. Maybe this is what made Panzer Blitz a worse game for me than Panzer Leader and a number of other of their earlier games. But I thought they had given it up by 79. Yet still, they're putting out games with this terrible design for the rules. Outside of that, the rules aren't terribly clear either, to me. But I think it's more the frustration of the physical aspect of the rules that causes me to have difficulty, because I can't turn back and look at pages and stuff. So, I've got it set up with the initial setup here. And we've got a few characters in play right from the beginning. Sheriff of Nottingham, Sheriff of Lincoln, some of the royal, some of the sheriff's supporting units. Who's not in play is Guy of Gisborne and his troops. You have to, I believe, move the Sheriff of Nottingham there to convince him into this game. Also, all of the Robin Hood allied people have to be recruited. And that kind of tough to see on the board because they're upside down and they all look white. But that includes merry men, and it also includes key characters. Unfortunately, there's information. Some of the characters have some special rules involved in them. It would be kind of nice if that was marked on the counters in a simple way. Like, some of them are able to recruit other units, some of them are not. Robin Hood's allowed to recruit other leaders, no one else is, but that's fine. But the ability to recruit the merry men is a limited group, and you can kind of guess who it is, but I think Will Stutley's one of them, and that seems a little odd to me. Okay. What are the values on the counters? Well, it depends on whether it's a leader or a non-leader counter. Leader counters have 3 numbers. The first number is a combat value, and for Robin that's a 3 there. The second number is his leadership ability, how many units he can command. And the Sheriff players don't have this. Their units don't require command, only the Robin Hood units do. And the third number is a movement allowance. On troops, they have a melee strength to the left, a movement to the right, all very normal, and then an archery ability up on top. And you'll see the Merry Men are your better archers. These are King's Foresters. And most of the Sheriff's troops don't have any archery ability at all, which is the big advantage, of course, of the Merry Men is they get to fight missile combat. You also have a pool of treasury markers, probably way more than you're going to need. 12 of them start off in the Sheriff's treasury. And the Robin Hood player has to kind of engineer a victory by getting several pieces together of it. He's got 4 choices. He has to win with 3 of them. We'll hit into that as we go on and hit the rules themselves. All right, we've also got a turn record sheet, which shows us the order of things, but the characters could come in earlier on a die roll on a special event. You also have a number of charts and tables up here. All look pretty good. Actually looks like an SPI style up there, but OSG and SPI weren't all that different in a lot of ways, except quantity. All right. And a summary of different little markers here, the icons that are used to indicate the different things. Most of them don't matter. Okay. Sequence of play. We start off with the Robin Hood phase, our Robin Hood player turn. And what he does is he's allowed to move his units first. Now, the Merry Men cannot move unless they're commanded by a leader, and the leaders can only command a number of units as indicated by their command ability. So Robin Hood could only move 2 Merry Men with him. Most of the leaders, I think, are 1s. Then, if Robin Hood moves into a space with Sheriff's units, they get to fight. And combat's going to be split into 3 separate segments. First, an archery segment, where you fire on where all archery capable units fire on this table. Now, there's some little special things here, like, hey, if you just cross the ford, your bowstrings are wet and you don't get an archery segment. Okay. And there's also modifiers for terrain listed here on the terrain effects chart. You can see, for example, in a mill, village, or town, 1 is subtracted from the archery value. Or in a keep, there's no archery allowed. Or in a castle, for that matter. Okay. And then finally, you go to a, well, no, not finally. Then you go to a melee step. There's actually sort of 4, but the archery and melee are put into 2. The person whose turn it is to move will be the attacker using a standard odds chart, and you take a certain amount of losses, basically. And it's quite possible that both people will still be in the space the next turn. The person who just went would then be the defender in the next turn, unless the new phasing player moves out. So you have the option to leave still. Okay, and then the final phase in the combat phase, or the final little piece, is a personal combat phase. If there are no troops left, but there are leaders left, they get into hand-to-hand combat. And if that's not the case, if one person has troops and the other person has leaders present, the troops might capture the leader, and you make a check for that. Okay, next thing is the robbery step. So, at the beginning of each turn, I think, there's a random events phase. No, that's the beginning of the Sheriff player turn. Okay, cool enough. So at the beginning of the Sheriff event player turn, or the Sheriff player turn, there's an event phase where he rolls a die, and on a 1 through 5, one of these things comes into play. Okay? And they're, I think, in numbered, no, they're not in numbered boxes. It depends on what you get, right? The result indicates a traveler, either a noble or a bishop. Yeah, well, I'm going to have to look up to see which kind comes in on what roll or whatever, because That's not clear on the rule on the table on the thing. But they come in at a random location, 1 through 5, based on that die roll. And we'll start moving to get off the map. And again, there's some kind of link up. You know, if you come in on 5, I think you got to come out 2 or something like that. Or 3, I'm not sure which. But there's, you know, an indication of which one you have to leave by. And they move at a steady rate. Well, if Robin Hood is in the same space as one of them after a combat phase, he can rob them. And he gets 2 gold. It comes out of the sheriff's money because he has to repay the visitor, and into Robin Hood's treasury. Alternatively, if those guys leave the map successfully, the sheriff gets a 1 gold fee for protecting the roads or whatever. All right. Then we go to recruitment. Robin Hood's allowed to recruit outlaw leaders, and a certain subset of the leaders, and it includes Friar Tuck, Little John, I think Will Scarlet, and maybe someone else. Never going to remember, got to look it up every time, and I'm talking about every time, like, you know, every turn or whatever, if I take little breaks from the game. Who's the other guy? Does Will Scarlet really have that ability? Annoying feature. It would be great if there was some little help on the counter. Anyway, those characters can recruit any merry men they're with, that they're in the same space with, and that just flips them over and then makes them eligible to move around in combat. And, you know, they're part of the insurrection. Alternatively, though, with leaders, only Robin Hood can muster them. For the most part, he just has to walk in and say, "Hi, join me." There are some exceptions, and again, there's a list, but there's a nice thing. That's on this leader recruitment table. Will Scarlet, Little John, and Friar Tuck, and you roll a die and see what happens. And in general, you're going to recruit Will Scarlet, but you might get injured. With Little John and Friar Tuck, you might not recruit them at all. They stay on the board and you can try again. If Robin Hood's injured in that way, he becomes kind of a sitting duck. He has to stay there for a turn, and he's easily captured. He can't put on a disguise, he can't move, he can't do anything. Okay, then we go to the hanging phase, where the sheriff's allowed to hang outlaw leaders in a town box. Now, to do this, he has to meet some kind of annoying situations. He can't just kill outlaws, because he's more moral than the outlaws are. They're allowed to just murder anyone they like, basically. But the sheriff has to actually follow the laws of England and put them on trial, and then take them out to the court in the town and try to hang them. And well, in the process of that, if they happen to get away with it, they just hang them at this point. I think the sheriff gets 2 gold for that. But if, you know, the Robin Hood player has significant opportunities to interfere with this. And if he gets any troops in the space at the end of his turn before the hanging phase, he frees any captives, even if the enemy still has troops in the space. Okay. Some differences, though, in the sheriff player turn. First of all, we get to roll that die. And again, I have to look up, hey, noble bishop, what comes in? It's not clarified in the sequence of play. It's somewhere in that foldy book of rules where, you know, it's a pain in the butt to deal with. Nice little game. Unfortunately, you really need another table to hold this thing. Okay. Movement phase. Sheriff's allowed to move pretty much like the Robin Hood player. Combat, same as the Robin Hood player. Taxation. Now here's the thing. The sheriff, when he has troops in a village, is allowed to take money from that village. And I think he only gets 1 gold from the village when he does so. He can't do it in consecutive turns either. So if he taxes a village, he can't just sit there and tax it every turn. And then we move the game turn marker around. Okay. I don't want to look up all those rules. It's annoying enough. I'll try to flip through this and get the gist of something. So, for example, movement inhibitions and prohibitions. That's important. So you have to stop when you enter an area with another leader. And that's kind of a big deal. Because you can kind of protect things. The one thing you can't protect is when the archery contest is held on Nottingham Green. You can't put a garrison around that, essentially. Robin Hood player is allowed to slip through no matter what. In fact, he's allowed to walk through units if it's required to get there. Bridges and fords, these are the only ways across the river. Keeps and castles, this is kind of cute. So, other than the ruined castle, all the castles on the board have a little inner sanctum, a keep. And in order to get there, you basically have to walk through the main castle space. It takes an extra movement. And in order to do that, you kind of have to fight your way through it, right? Except there's a secret passage in every castle. Only Robin Hood knows about these, and he, one other leader, and I think 2 merry men maximum can sneak through there. They might be discovered, though, and there's a die roll. If they're discovered, they kind of fail to make it in. They have to retreat. They can also leave by secret passages without having to make a roll. And as soon as they do that, as soon as they use a secret passage, it's discovered and cannot be used again for any purpose except to leave the keep. You can't enter the keep that way. So, not really except for any purpose, right? Okay. Yeah, sometimes I just talk to hear myself speak, I guess. Okay, now we come to the fun. We get to unfold this and try to figure out where the hell to put it so I can look at this second part of the rolls. Yeah? Alright. Combat's actually pretty simple. I don't want to go into too much about it. We've got our specifics about the outlaw recruitment here. Reinforcements. Ah, yes. The sheriff gets some fixed reinforcements. These can't be affected by die roll. That just come in on certain turns. Now, Prince John is one of these random guys. He could come in on rolls of 6s on the random events table. There's some other things in there. For example, you can't have two random guys come in consecutive turns. All kinds of little rules like that, just to fix things up. But I'm just trying to give you the main overview of this. All right. What about traveler arrival? Let's see what we get. 5 or 6. So you roll again, and on a 5 or a 6, it's a bishop, and otherwise it's a noble. And bishops are cool because when Robin Hood robs him, he gets 2 gold. When he robs nobles, he only gets 1. I forgot about that. All kinds of rules about... so Robin Hood can murder whatever he likes. The sheriff player cannot, of course. But the sheriff player does have the right to hang outlaws, and we've kind of touched on that a little bit, and that they can be rescued. Maid Marian's a little special. You can't hang her, but you can do as bad. You can marry her off to Guy of Gisborne, and it works almost exactly the same as a hanging. You have to drag her to a village and blah, blah, blah. Special effect of the archery contest. Once per game, once King John's in the game, you can call an archery contest, and I think it's 2 turns later. It's going to be held on Nottingham Green, and people have to be there. I think the sheriff and or Prince John and other stuff. If Robin Hood shows up, whether he's disguised or not, he wins. If he wins, he gets 2 gold from the sheriff. If he doesn't show up, the sheriff gets some money from him or something. If Prince John and the sheriff or whatever don't show up, they lose 5 money. All kinds of little things here. You just gotta, pretty much look them up when you need them. Because honestly, unless you play this game a lot, and I think that's unlikely, you're not going to remember all the little things. So it's really a bunch of... The way I think of it is, think of awful green things with lots and lots of little special rules you got to look up all the time, and a bonus fold-out rule book that makes it incredibly difficult to do so. Not that awful green things is terribly good at that, but okay. And I think you're getting some of my view on why I don't understand why this game is rated so high. But okay. We've already scratched on marriage. So then, yeah, I love this fucker. Okay, ending the game. So the game can end in a number of different ways. If Robin Hood dies, well, the game's over and the sheriff wins. If King Richard dies, I think the game's over and the sheriff wins. I don't remember. Maybe not. But the game ends at that point. So chances are Robin Hood will lose because of it, but because King Richard's one of his victory conditions. But the thing here is the sheriff can't hang King Richard, but he can murder him, or he could kill him through some accident. King Richard ends in the same box as Robin Hood at the end of a game turn. That will end the game. So Robin Hood has to be careful to keep them separate until he has enough victory points to win. 30 game turns, that's usually the sign of a Robin Hood loss, but he may not have a way to end the game if Richard's dead. And then killing off all the sheriff's leaders. So if he kills all the established authorities in the area, including Guy of Gisborne, who's just a noble trying to help out the local authorities, he wins the game automatically. He has succeeded in instilling his reign of anarchy. Okay. So now Robin Hood has to get 3 out of 4 victory conditions. One is marrying Maid Marian and not having her held captive. Doesn't say anything about Robin being captive, for whatever that means. Another is that Richard and Robin Hood are together at the end of the game. That ends the game, but it counts as a victory point. So that's kind of cool. A third is that Robin's dropped the sheriff's treasury down to 5 marks or less. There are no negatives in this. If the sheriff gets drained to 0, Robin starts taking from the gold mark pool. And the fourth is that Robin has at least 20 marks in his treasury. They suggest that it's possible that maybe it's too easy for Robin to win, in which case you want to make sure that he succeeds in both of the first 2 conditions, marrying Maid Marian and meeting King Richard. I don't think that's necessary, but it may be the case that Robin has a slight advantage. But I don't really care enough about that. Anyway, we'll load this sucker up and get playing.